What's up, guys? And welcome to the smallest soccer podcast in America. It is Stateside Footy. And I am your host, Steve Silver, the littlest little guy in American soccer. We're the underdogs. Well, tonight we're talking a little bit about the Leagues Cup because obviously the semifinals has been played and now we know who's going to be in the final. I got to be honest with you, it couldn't have gone any worse for Major League Soccer for the second straight year. But before we get into that, go ahead and smash that like button. Or if you don't like me, hit the dislike button. Go ahead and hit a subscribe as well, too. And, of course, if you want to talk soccer, go ahead and just drop a comment, and we'll sit here and talk football. All right. So, we know that Leagues Cup is official. We know that it's going to be the Columbus Crew versus LAFC. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that this is the worst possible scenario for Major League Soccer. Now, before we get into that, I just want to put this out there that I love Major League Soccer. I really do. But that being said, I love football globally, regardless. But when it comes to Leagues Cup, my biggest problem isn't the what. I like the what. I like the idea of Leagues Cup. Because if you're an MLS side, you want to face teams that are better than you. It gives you an idea of where you stand as a franchise, where you need to clean up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, you want to see your DPs or your TAM level players playing against, guys that are, playing in Liga MX. Except, Liga MX is far and away better than Major League Soccer. I know a lot of people think that the gap has shrunk, and who knows, maybe it has. All I do know is that, Liga MX, players are very good. Liga MX teams have, deeper payrolls, obviously deeper teams, which is obvious when you play, the CONCACAF Champions Cup. There's a reason why Liga MX teams seem to dominate. So, now that we're here and we know exactly who's going to play. Oh, and by the way, if you want to know just how dominant Mexican sides have been in the CONCACAF Champions League, essentially since the I would consider it the modern day playing of it, which I would say would be 2000, 2008, 2009, somewhere in that area. Liga MX sides have won it every single year except for one, and that was 2022. And my beloved Seattle Sounders pulled it off. But when it comes to Champions Cup, the what was great. I get back into this, and I like the idea. The biggest problem that I have with this is, number one, it's an obvious money grab, which is why supporters groups have, across this country, have said, you know what, we don't like the idea of you trying to push out the USL, the US Open Cup, in favor for a tournament that nobody likes. And of course, they benefited last year with the with the Messi effect, showing up for Leagues Cup, and everything that happened, that transpired. But the biggest problem is the fact that for the second straight year now, you essentially had an all MLS semifinal, and now, of course, you're going to have an all MLS final. This was designed to have this almost the same effect as the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And what I mean by that is more Liga MX teams getting deeper in the tournament. There's only one problem, though. Liga MX teams do not like Leagues Cup because, number one, it takes them away from their families. And, of course, it takes them away from their supporters groups down in Mexico. If this was a situation where even if they played group stage games down in Mexico, that would give that would give it a little bit of a different flavor. Now, I'm certainly not, I'm certainly not saying that it literally needs to be a home and home, but if you're going to do it, why not have at least group stage being played down in Mexico? I think that would be absolutely fantastic. And especially, especially when it comes to Apple, you broadcast from the bigger stadiums, Estadio Azteca, down in, especially down in Guadalajara. You can do that in bigger cities, bigger stadiums, things like that. But there's, the drawback is what we saw all throughout this tournament, where sure, there were some games where you had a lot of fans that showed up, but for the most part, you actually had empty stadiums for Leagues Cup. And the reasoning behind it is MLS supporters groups and fans don't want to watch MLS versus MLS Leagues Cup matches because we see it during the regular season. The other thing obviously has to do with the fact that, yes, a lot of fans were turned off by Don Garber and his suggestion that the reason why they stopped doing U.S. Open Cup in favor of Leagues Cup was because of schedule congestion. And of course, that congestion, was self-created because of Leagues Cup. So one of the things that I didn't appreciate as a fan was you taking my intelligence for granted. Like, I couldn't see this coming a mile away. It would play a lot better if you just came out and said that, yeah, this is more advantageous, more profitable for the league. That's understandable. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. I actually think supporters would probably just be like, you know what? Okay, I understand. It sucks, but I understand. But that being said, they also have some Soccer United marketing, which is the promotional arm of Major League Soccer, CONCACAF, the Mexican Federation, and so on and so on. Okay, they have, that's the thing, is they can market the U.S. Open Cup correctly, and it could be something very good on top of Leagues Cup. I think both can be harmonious. Another drawback is the fact that Liga MX sides do not give a shit about this tournament, and that was obvious. And I think that came across during the MLS versus Liga MX All-Star game in Columbus, when I right off the top of my head, I can't remember his name, but it was a gentleman who I believe was playing for either America or Pachuca. When asked about the upcoming Leagues Cup at that point in time, he basically smiled and said that it's cute. It's this cute little thing, and it's going to be basically played as an exhibition. And that's how Liga MX teams have played this all throughout. There's no way, when you start going through some of the group stage games that we saw, and we saw some of these results. In no way, shape, or form, Querétaro in the group stage, I think they played. They only ended up with 1 point. No wins. No wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. San Luis, same thing. No wins, 1 point. Puebla, 0-2. Tigres, on the other hand, actually happened to play pretty well. So, it is what it is. Cruz Azul, 3 points. Mazatlan, who actually had a nice little spirited run, 3 points. Pachuca, only 2 points. Santos Laguna, 2 points. Pumas, 2 points. Monterrey, 1 point. Chivas, 2 points. And what I consider a humiliating loss to San Jose. Juarez was pretty good. Toluca was pretty good. But, Leon, 1 point. Necaxa, 3 points. Tijuana, no points. Atlas, 3 points. My point is a lot of these results were these teams down in, teams from Mexico who were saying, all right, that's cool. We'll play, and it is what it is. Like, we're going to go ahead and just play this like an exhibition, and the results are what they are. And if we don't move on, why is that the worst thing in the world? Because I understand they don't want to be up here as long as they have to. I get it. I wouldn't want to be up here either. If I was a member of a Mexican football side who had just started their season, who are now going to be away from everything for a month, and they don't even get the the privilege of playing in front of their home supporters. I get it. And that's a problem for Major League Soccer because, a lot of money went into creating Leagues Cup. And the idea was that, the partnership between Liga MX, Major League Soccer, and Apple TV were going to be fruitful. This was going to be a harmonious, cooperation between two. Some other things were, some other people were saying, and I quote, rumors that one main reason that execs at the FMF are not liking Leagues Cup is because it's not turning out to be profitable as they had imagined it would be, as Apple is capturing all the value from TV in this cup, and Liga MX is stopped. Obviously, this should be easy to renegotiate, and I hope they do, because I, for one, would like to see more League Cup. And I know it won't happen if it isn't profitable. It's valid to criticize football execs for putting profit before sports, but I also recognize that profit is a necessity. I'm fine with them making a profit as long as they don't do it at the expense of the sport, but also by enhancing it. I agree. I also do not have a problem with it, but it gets back to the what. Is that Leagues Cup was a great idea. And again, if you're an MLS side, you want to play as many of these games against, Cruz Azul, Pachuca, Tigres, as much as you possibly can, because it gives you an idea of where you're at, and especially for those clubs that are participating in next year's Club World Cup, it's a good litmus test to find out exactly where you're at. That being said, my biggest worry is the fact that this is going to become oversaturated because we're playing this every year. And then every single year, it's going to be played out to the exact same results. Liga MX sides are going to show up, and then every single summer, more than half are going to bow out in the group stage. And by the time you get to the quarterfinals, finals, you might have one or two Liga MX sides left. And then, of course, by the time you get to the final, it's going to be, name it, throw in your MLS team. The Colorado Rapids versus, DC United or Philadelphia. That's not good for business, man. That's absolutely not good for business. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up cannibalizing those fans that initially were excited for Leagues Cup. And by year 5, you're not going to have fan interest from ticket sales, but also you're going to have dwindling viewership come via subscriptions or just in general viewing interest. And that's going to be a problem because no fans, no viewers, no money. And this is going to go by the way of the old cup, the old cups that MLS used to do, that were really fun in the beginning, but by the end, of it, it went by the wayside, like the old Super Cup. Good idea, but of course, it ended up not being bang for the buck. I like the idea of doing this every single other year. Every 2 years, this is a good idea. Because it's going to be enough time between versions of Leagues Cup where you're going to be able to sell that idea of, oh yeah, the last one was actually pretty good. You know what I mean? And also you give MLS teams 2 more years between, Leagues Cup to enhance their rosters. But also you also give the Mexican side, a breather from it. So, every single summer, they're not having to basically stay in hotels for a month during their summer. And I actually think Mexican players will, most likely be up for playing it if this was done every other year. And of course, in the odd years, you can play US Open Cup and you get to fulfill your obligation as the top tier of American soccer, because that responsibility still has to be met. And I think that's the biggest problem with this, right? Is how do you balance two? Do you just allow MLS teams to play US Open Cup while also playing Leagues Cup, even making schedules even more congested? I also think that eases schedule congestion by doing this every other year. I think from a logistics standpoint, it makes more sense to do it every other year. And I also think that if US Open Cup is done correctly, as in, regional, emphasizing regional matchups in the Open Cup, and also making sure that instead of MLS fighting against the USL, that, MLS basically says, hey, listen, here's what's going to happen. We're going to do this, but we're going to do this right. So we lead, you follow, and we're going to throw our marketing arm behind this so we can actually get this done right. And of course, that also means that, for US Open, for US Open Cup before, for games that are before, the round of 16 or whatever it is, obviously, that the logistics of that have to be worked out. And of course, from MLS sides as well, too, depending on whether or not they're going to be bringing their first team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But US Open Cup can definitely be something special while still being able to have League Cup on the other side. Which gets me into the next point, as we have about 10-ish minutes left. I think what Leagues Cup for me has emphasizes the fact that Major League Soccer has to continue to grow when it comes to salary cap. And we'll get into promotion, relegation, Major League Soccer coming up as this show progresses. But let's understand that that's not going to happen. That is pro rel. Well, I'm 43. Okay. Over the course of the next 30 years, by the time that I'm 73, I would probably assume that that's not going to happen. Now, if this league continues to expand and it gets to 40 teams, which I think is what's headed in that direction, I can see an MLS 1 and MLS 2 with internal promotion relegation, because the entire, all the infrastructure is there. You have all the stadiums. And you have the owners who are basically looking at this as it's still MLS, it's still a closed system, and as long as certain teams are spending, all that's going to do is continue to inflate our valuation, our franchise evaluation. So they're not necessarily losing any money if they're in MLS 2 compared to MLS 1. You get what I'm saying. That's what I can see. But until that point in time, let's understand that they need to raise the salary cap, because one of the things that League Cup shows me, not just necessarily League Cup, but CONCACAF Champions Cup shows me, is that when you are facing a Liga MX side in mid-season, for us, it's at the beginning of the season, so we're not necessarily in mid-season form. And so there's a tendency of, if MLS teams go for it versus, you know what I mean, where, you know, you're running the risk of potentially messing your middle of the season because of roster depth, those type of things. That's what this has me thinking, that it's time. When this league was at 20 teams, it made sense, man. It really made sense to keep a salary cap absolutely low because it was still growing. We didn't have the ownership as we have today. And when I look around the league and I see these ownership groups, I see ownership groups that are headed by billionaires. The type of people that can sway political movement in certain cities in order to get stadiums built. That's what I see. So it's there. The ownership groups are there. The stadiums are there. The infrastructure is in place when it comes to academies. All of it's there now. And yet this league has what, a $5.4 million salary cap? I think the average MLS player is making like what, $550,000 a year. And it's, I guess it's fine because we have TAM level players, which I believe is like what, $1 million and $1 million and one. So, and this also comes to light too, is because, Messi's not going to be around forever. Maybe another year, maybe two at tops. What is this league going to do post Messi? How are you going to keep those fans engaged? Because right now, you have new sets of eyes on Major League Soccer because of the Messi effect, or you had it. I understand he's injured right now, but he's going to be back. And you're going to have people who are going to come out just to watch Messi. How are you going to keep those fans engaged in Major League Soccer under the existing roster rules? It's a good question. And you have owners that want to spend. Now, I personally think that with this forced parity and with this salary cap, it is there to protect cheap owners that don't necessarily have the fan engagement in their own cities where they can, where they would be able to recoup some of that investment. That's what this is, and this is there for. It is certainly not there for those advantageous owners who are very much trying to, get a new DP every single summer window. It's not there for that. As a matter of fact, there's weird league rules that allow LAFC to do what they're doing, to allow Miami to go out there and do what they're doing, right? Yeah, there's 3 Ps, but there's that 4th DP, 5th DP. You know what I mean? We're gonna figure out a way to make certain guys TAM level, but they're making far more than they're making essentially DP money on a TAM contract. So it just means to me that it's time. It is time to, I wouldn't say necessarily rip off the entire Band-Aid, but it's also time to up that salary cap, because again, you have owners who have that already in place and understand that they're going to be able to spend a certain amount of money, and they're going to be able to recoup that investment with fan engagement. But the other thing that this does, though, is it also improves the league. Competition is there for a reason. Competition is only good for business. When you have multiple teams, trying to, trying to keep up with the Joneses, man, all that does is create better, better franchise valuation. So for teams like San Jose that are never going to spend, having the haves continue to spend and be in an arms race, that's going to be good business for teams that just won't do that. They're still going to be able to profit because every single time that, those teams are going to be on TV based on viewership, the next cycle of TV negotiations, that's going to continue to go up. 100%. More eyes on the sport means better broadcast deals. Better broadcast deals means more money to each individual franchise. It is basically the American sports model. We know what the NFL can do. And of course, that was never always the case, but you understand exactly what happens when the talent pool increases. When the talent pool increases, you have a more compelling product. A more compelling product means more people are going to watch it. The more people watch it, the more money the franchise is going to make. This league does nothing with San Jose winning an MLS Cup. Like if San Jose, Colorado, Vancouver, Montreal win an MLS Cup, I mean, congratulations, but it does nothing for the league. Nobody cares outside of those cities. But if Miami wins MLS Cup or if LA wins MLS Cup, that is global. That matters. And those teams should be the teams that the league should be wanting to see compete every single season. And that's what they do. But what happens is when you have 5 or 6 teams that are competing every single year, it's going to mean mid-table teams are going to start spending as well too, because they're going to want to get in on that action. Now they might not spend to that level, but they will spend something because they have to in order to compete. And the parity isn't in the salary cap. Okay? That's not the parity. The parity is in the playoffs. That's the parity, because if you spend just enough and it puts you in a level where you can be a playoff team, and because of the new playoff formats, you have just as easily as of a chance as beating one of those top 5 teams than you wouldn't otherwise. It makes sense. And imagine if the salary cap would be at 10 million. I know some people have mentioned to me, what about like 25? I just don't see that. But what about 15? What if your salary cap was at 15 and you got rid of 2 DP spots? Each team had 1, so you can go out there and sign the biggest of biggest stars, but you get rid of Tam and you get rid of Gam, and you allow your cap people that you work with to figure out how you're going to be able to do that. And then what ends up happening is now your average salary goes from $550,000 to $1.5 million. Now you start opening up the doors to Europe. And that's where this league needs to be. This league needs to be the league where, like, I'll give you a good example. Tottenham, my squad, may go Spurs. Tottenham paid what? 40 million, 35 plus 5 for Archie Gray, who's 18 years old. They also, I think they just paid 30 for Odebear. Let's find out really quick. Yeah, Wilson Odebear, the French player. Yeah, I think it was, it was about the same. About 30 for Odebear. Now imagine if that was Major League Soccer, getting those guys. You don't think a 19, 20-year-old wouldn't mind coming to the States for a few years before eventually going back to the Premier League, collecting a a $5 million paycheck for the first couple of years of their professional career before eventually being sold off. Or being able to bring in some of these young guys on loans for a year before ultimately going back to their parent club. That's what raising the salary cap does. Obviously, they've done I think Major League Soccer has done a brilliant job in the South American market, mining good Brazilian players, Argentinian players, and I think they need to continue to do that. And I'm not just talking about the 28, 29-year-olds, but the ability to get very good young players who are going to Europe, but they're going to take a 2-year pit stop, a 3-year pit stop in Major League Soccer before ultimately going back. And all that is going to do is it's going to create new revenue streams for Major League Soccer teams. Because if they're the league that is selling on to England, Italy, Spain, it's going to do is allow Major League Soccer's transfer budgets to continue to go up. And that's important because obviously the more opportunity you have to have a larger transfer budget means also your salary cap is going to go up as well too, to fit that. And it's something that can be done over the next couple of years. We have the 2026 World Cup. All eyes are going to be on American soccer. And it's important that we don't fuck this up. And as soon as the World Cup is done, what's going to be left are soccer fans like me and my friends. Now, of course, I watch Major League Soccer and I have nothing but good things to say about Major League Soccer. But my friends who are very rabid soccer fans, what do they do on Saturday and Sunday? They watch the Premier League. How do you get those soccer fans? Because, Major League Soccer's hardcore fans are always going to stay. Those supporters are always going to be supporters. Well, I mean, if the Sounders, don't get their foot out of their ass, maybe not, but I digress. But you're always going to have your hardcore fans. It's always going to be those fringe fans that, it's always going to be the fringe fans that you're going to have to, corral, right? I'll give you a good example before we call it good. The NFL had a stroke of brilliance, right? Because they understood that hardcore football fans are always going to be watching. But it's how do you get casual fans to stay engaged with the NFL and then create new fans create new revenue. And it was in the 2001-2002 season when they switched commissioners. And it was a stroke of brilliance because the biggest thing at that time was fantasy football. And of course, it still is today. But at that point in time, it was, really starting to get big. And they noticed that they had a lot more viewer engagement because of fantasy football. But after that, that engagement would stop. So how do you ensure that those fantasy football fans become fans? Well, what they did was they changed the rules and it became a quarterback league. It became a quarterback and wide receiver league. I'm not going to get deep into the weeds, but they stripped the game of its defense, and now it is a fantasy football league. That is what the NFL is today, and it worked. And Major League Soccer is kind of right on that cusp right now, where it's like, how do you ensure you get those soccer fans on weekends to watch Major League Soccer first before they go to their DVR to go watch the English Premier League? How do you get those fans? Well, it starts by ensuring that you have a compelling product on the field. And this isn't just about, getting young American soccer stars who are in Europe right now to come back to the league. That's not going to sell. If teams do that, fair enough. I don't think they should, but you get what I'm saying. It means that you have to make sure that, number one, every single year, there are certain teams that fans hate that are going to be tuning in because they fucking hate them, LAFC. But it also means that your team, whoever you support, is also taking advantage of the summer transfer windows. And that only starts by increasing your salary cap. That has to be the one thing, because you know what? If every single year the Seattle Sounders are getting European loans through the door, if they're getting the next hottest South American young star, 21, 22, who's on the cusp of Europe, but they were able to bring him in here because they were able to use that one DP slot, and they were able to pay him $15-20 million. Or they got that European youngster on loan for a year, or they were able to convince an Archie Gray that, yeah, no doubt, man, no doubt, you're going to be playing in the Premier League soon enough, but why don't you take a couple of years, come hang out in LA, come hang out in New York or Miami, make your money, enjoy the football, and then you'll be sold back to whichever Premier League side. That's what has to happen. You have to deliver a compelling product. And right now, Major League Soccer is a product that is very high on goal scoring, but also very, very low on defense, very low on coaching. But I digress. So Leagues Cup. Columbus versus LAFC. I'm going to take Columbus. I never pick against Wilfred Nancy. But ultimately, I don't really care because I don't support either. And I don't think that this was a good representation of what MLS wanted for Leagues Cup. I'm sure they wanted Club America versus Columbus. That didn't play out. So as soon as this is at its complete, MLS will resume with Inter Miami leading the Eastern Conference by 5, and of course in the Western Conference it's the Law Galaxy up on LAFC by 2 and Real Salt Lake by 5, and of course my Seattle Sounders are 1 point sitting in the 7th spot with their rivals Portland nipping at their heels. But I digress. That's going to do it for me. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we will be back, and I hope you guys have a great evening. Take care of yourselves and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.